Let's begin by addressing the title of this talk head on. Dark psychology tricks that instantly control anyone. It's a compelling phrase. It promises a secret power, a set of master keys to the human mind. It sells books, it fills seminars, it preys on a deep human desire for certainty, for advantage, for an edge in a confusing world. But that phrase is a trap. The first and most important thing you must understand is that the promise itself is the very essence of the manipulation we are here to dissect. Think about it. Instantly. Control. Anyone. Each of these words is a lie designed to bypass your critical thinking and speak directly to your desperation or your curiosity. They are the bait. The reality is far more mundane, and because of that, far more dangerous. No one, no technique, no sequence of words can instantly control a thinking, feeling human being with free will. To believe otherwise is to subscribe to a fantasy, a cartoon version of human psychology. And when you believe in the cartoon, you become blind to the subtle, slow, and devastatingly effective reality of true coercive influence. What is being sold to you as instant control is, in truth, the exploitation of predictability. It is not mind control. It is pattern recognition. A predator does not control a gazelle. It studies the herd, learns the pathways to the water, understands the triggers for panic. It exploits the patterns of behavior that are hardwired for survival. Human manipulators operate on the same principle. They don't wave a magic wand. They learn your patterns. They identify the shortcuts in your own brain, the cognitive biases, the emotional reflexes, the social programming we all carry, and they simply pull the levers. They exploit the pattern of reciprocity. If someone gives you something, you feel a deep, instinctual urge to give back. They exploit the pattern of authority. A title, a suit, a tone of voice can make us hesitate to question. They exploit the pattern of social proof. If everyone else is doing it, it must be right. These are not tricks in the sense of a magician's sleight of hand. They are the exploitation of your own operating system. The manipulator hasn't hacked the code. They've just learned how to use the existing user interface to run a malicious program. And the word control. This is perhaps the most sinister misdirection. The goal of the true psychological manipulator is rarely the overt puppet string control you see in films. That is unsustainable. It creates resistance. It invites rebellion. No, the more profound goal is to manufacture your compliance, to make you want to choose what they have chosen for you, to make their objective feel like your own idea, your own desire, your own logical conclusion. It is a slow steering of the ship, 1 degree off course at a time, until you find yourself in a foreign ocean, believing you still hold the map. This is not control. It is a hijacking of your own autonomy, masked as a shared journey, which leads to anyone. This is the final lie. The techniques we will discuss are potent, but they are not equally effective on every person in every situation. Their efficacy depends on 2 things: the skill of the manipulator and the vulnerability of the target. A person who is lonely will respond differently to simulated intimacy than a person with a strong social circle. A person in crisis is more susceptible to the only solution presented by a false dilemma. A person with unexamined self-doubt is fertile ground for gaslighting. The promise of anyone implies an omnipotence that does not exist. It is a marketing ploy. The truth is more targeted and more personal. They look for the cracks in the armor. They look for the wounds that haven't fully healed. They look for the moment you are tired, stressed, uncertain, or yearning for something more. So, if we discard the fantasy of instant universal control, what are we left with? We are left with the sobering, powerful truth. We are left with process, a slow, deliberate, often charming process of disassembly. It begins with information gathering, listening not to understand you, but to catalog your fears, your pride, your hopes. It proceeds with emotional contagion, mirroring your feelings or presenting carefully crafted emotional states to alter your own. It advances by creating a new reality, piece by piece, where they are the source of good, or the solution to pain, or the only one who truly understands. This is why we must start here, by dismantling the myth. Because if you walk away from this thinking you have learned a set of instant tricks, you have learned nothing of value. You have only memorized a few phrases, empty and powerless, without context. Worse, you may be tempted to use them, and in your clumsy, unskilled application, you will cause harm and be seen for what you are, an amateur playing with fire. But if you understand that what we are really discussing is the systematic exploitation of human patterns, of predictable vulnerabilities, then you shift from a position of seeking power over others to a position of building sovereignty within yourself. You move from the offense to the defense, and a strong defense built on awareness is the only thing that truly neutralizes the offense. The first step in building that defense is to reject the seductive lie of instant control and to see the slow, patient shadow for what it is. Now, let us examine the tools this shadow uses. If the promise of instant control is the bait, then we must examine the hook. How does an influence operation begin? Not with a command, but with a subtle shift in the atmosphere of a room, or a conversation, or a relationship. The manipulator's true entry point is not the logical mind. Reasoning is slow, it is deliberate, it questions. They cannot afford to engage with it directly, not at first. So, they bypass it. They go under the radar. Their primary tool, the master key to initial access, is the strategic hijacking of emotion. We are social, empathic creatures. Our brains are wired for connection, and a critical part of that wiring is a phenomenon known as emotional contagion. It is the unconscious, automatic tendency to mimic and synchronize with the emotional expressions, vocal tones, postures, and behaviors of those around us. We catch feelings from others as easily as we catch a common cold. A genuinely cheerful person can lift the mood of a group. A person radiating anxiety can make a room tense. This is not a flaw, it is a feature of our humanity. It is the glue of social bonds. But like any powerful feature, it has a vulnerability that can be exploited. A skilled manipulator uses this not as a passive phenomenon, but as an active weapon. They engage in crafted emotional contagion. They do not just feel an emotion and broadcast it. They consciously perform an emotional state designed to produce a specific, predictable reaction in you. Their display is a tool, calibrated to trigger your mirror neurons, to make you feel something first, so that your slower, logical mind is playing catch-up from a compromised position. Consider the most common opening gambits: the manufactured urgency, the sharp tone, the widened eyes, the clipped sentences conveying a crisis. Before you've even processed the facts of the supposed problem, your own heart rate has increased. Your body is preparing for threat. In that adrenalized state, your capacity for careful analysis is diminished, and your instinct is to act, to resolve the threat. They have created a chemical environment in your own body conducive to compliance. Or consider the performance of wounded sympathy. The slumped shoulders, the soft, understanding tone, the slow head shake at the wrongs you've suffered. They mirror the posture of a trusted confidant so precisely that you feel seen, felt, understood. This contagion of false empathy lowers defenses, creates a sense of alliance, and builds the obligation of reciprocity. You feel you owe them your trust because they have so generously given you theirs. It is a masterpiece of emotional counterfeiting. Even anger can be a calculated contagion, not the loss of control, but a controlled, focused projection of fury. It is designed to trigger a freeze, flight, or appease response. It aims to startle your system into submission, to make your primary goal the de-escalation of their emotio. Now state, often at the cost of your own boundaries or best judgment. Your logical mind is sidelined by a more primal imperative: calm the threat. This is the critical understanding. They are not arguing with you. They are not initially trying to win a debate. They are setting the emotional weather. They are creating the climate in which your decisions will grow. If they can make you feel afraid, your options will seem limited to escape. If they can make you feel uniquely understood, your loyalty will feel like a debt. If they can make you feel excited and grandiose, your skepticism will feel like a killjoy. Your emotions, which you believe to be your authentic reactions, have been subtly seeded and cultivated by a foreign actor. This process works because of a simple, brutal chronology. Emotion precedes cognition. The neural pathways for emotional response are older, faster. The feeling hits you in the gut, the chest, the skin, a visceral reality. The reasoned analysis of that feeling happens precious milliseconds later in the prefrontal cortex. The manipulator's entire strategy is built on winning that race. They deliver the emotional payload, and by the time your logic arrives on the scene to investigate, it is presented with a fait accompli, a strong feeling, and its job often becomes not to question the feeling's origin, but to rationalize it, to justify why you are so angry, so afraid, so infatuated, so obligated. They bypass the gatekeeper by appealing directly to the tenant, and once the tenant, your emotional core, is agitated, the gatekeeper, your critical mind, is often too busy managing the turmoil to check the visitor's credentials. Therefore, the first line of defense, the earliest possible warning system, is not in your thoughts, but in your body. It is that unexplained tightness in your stomach when the charming smile doesn't reach the eyes. It is the F ain't chill when a tone of voice contradicts the generous words being spoken. It is a sense of dissonance, a flicker of unease that precedes any logical reason for doubt. That is your system detecting a mismatch. It is sensing that the emotional weather being projected is artificial, a performance meant to trigger a storm inside you. Do not dismiss that signal as irrational. It is your pattern recognition software, evolved over millennia, detecting a predator's camouflage. The emotional contagion is real, but your deepest instinct is telling you its source is not. They begin by trying to make you feel before you can think. Your power begins the moment you notice the attempt. Once the emotional climate has been set, once you are off balance, intrigued, or emotionally activated, the operation moves into a more sustained phase. This is no longer about the initial hook, but about building a structure around you, a structure that feels at first like shelter and later reveals itself as a cage. This structure is often built with 3 interlocking components: an overwhelming gift, a gradual dismantling of your compass, and a cruel, addictive game of chance. The first component is often mistaken for genuine affection. It is called love bombing, though it has nothing to do with love. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not seek to overwhelm or to create debt. What we are discussing is a strategic overpayment. It is a deliberate, concentrated flood of attention, admiration, validation, and apparent vulnerability. Gifts, time, declarations of profound connection. They are delivered not as a generous offering, but as an emotional down payment. The manipulator is creating an overwhelming social and emotional debt. You feel seen in ways you have never been seen before. Your defenses, starved for such recognition, begin to dissolve. This is the construction of the cage's first wall, a sense of profound, intoxicating obligation. You owe them your trust, your loyalty, your benefit of the doubt, because look at all they have given you. It feels unique. It is, in fact, a calculated investment. But such intensity is unsustainable as a genuine state. And here, the second component is introduced, often just as the first begins to subtly recede. This is gaslighting. The term is overused, but its mechanics are precise. Gaslighting is the systematic undermining of your perception of reality to make you doubt your own judgment, memory, and sanity. After the overpayment, you are primed to believe this person has your best interests at heart. So when they begin to casually contradict your memory, that's not how it happened, or dismiss your feelings, you're being too sensitive, you were misinterpreting, or reframe clear events as products of your imagination, you are more likely to believe them than yourself. Why? Because the love bomber established themselves as the source of good. If they are good, and they are telling you your perception is faulty, then your perception must be faulty. It is a brutal, logical trap, A slow drip of doubt is injected into the foundation of your own mind. You start to double-check your recollections. You start to apologize for your reactions. You begin to outsource your sense of reality to the person who seems so certain. This is the second wall of the cage, the erosion of your inner compass. You are being taught that you cannot navigate without them. Now the structure is ready for its final, most psychologically potent element, intermittent reinforcement. This is not about constant reward or constant punishment. That is predictable, and predictability breeds adjustment, not addiction. Intermittent reinforcement is the random, unpredictable dispensation of reward and punishment. It is the slot machine psychology, U-perf, Orm in action, seeking approval, seeking a return of that initial intensity, seeking to avoid their disapproval, and sometimes you get the reward, a flash of the old charm, a moment of validation, a reprieve from coldness, and sometimes you get nothing, or worse, punishment. This unpredictability is key. It creates a state of anxious, hypervigilant focus on the source of the reward. Your brain, wired to detect patterns, goes into overdrive trying to figure out the formula. What did I do right yesterday to get the warmth? What did I do wrong today to get the silence? You become the active participant in your own conditioning, working harder and harder, giving more and more, chasing the next hit of that original validation. The manipulator becomes the central puzzle of your existence. Your energy, your thoughts, your emotional labor are all consumed by solving them. See how the triad locks together. The love bombing creates the debt and the addiction to their high valuation of you. The gaslighting destroys your trust in your own ability to assess the situation, making you rely on their version of events. And the intermittent reinforcement turns the entire relationship into a Skinner box, where you are the subject, compulsively pressing the lever, hoping for a pellet, blaming yourself when it doesn't come. It is a closed system. Any distress you feel can be explained away by the gaslighting. You're overreacting. Any longing for the initial phase is teased by the intermittent reward. Any thought of leaving is countered by the weight of the initial overpayment and the distorted belief that no one else will ever understand you like they do, a belief they have carefully cultivated. This is not a series of unrelated tricks. It is an ecosystem of control. It manufactures dependency by first creating a false paradise, then making you doubt your ability to perceive any oath or terrain, and finally ensuring that the path back to even a glimpse of that paradise is minefield you must endlessly, anxiously tread. The goal is to make the cage feel like the only world that exists, with the internal landscape reshaped. Your emotional response is conditioned, your reality questioned, your compliance made addictive. The manipulator must now direct that energy toward specific outcomes. They have built an engine of influence within you. Now they must steer it. This steering is not done through overt commands, which would risk awakening your defiance. It is done through the careful, theatrical construction of choice itself. Their objective is to make you believe you are standing at a crossroads of your own free will, when in truth, every signpost has been crafted by them, pointing down the single road they have already paved. The first method for this is a subtle priming of agreement. It is called the yes set or the compliance ladder. The principle is simple. A person who has agreed with you on several small, uncontroversial, or obvious points is psychologically primed to agree with a larger, more significant request. It creates a momentum of consensus. The manipulator will engage you in a series of statements designed to elicit a yes, either verbally or through simple mental assent. It's been a long week, hasn't it? We all want what's best for the project. Nobody likes feeling taken for granted. Each agreement is a minor click, a small turn of the psychological dial toward the agreed position. It builds a self-image. You are a reasonable person. You and this other person are aligned. You see the world similarly. By the time the significant request or controversial opinion is presented, disagreeing with it feels like breaking the pattern, like being inconsistent, like causing conflict where none existed. The larger yes feels like the natural, logical conclusion of all the smaller ones that came before. You are not agreeing to their demand. You are agreeing with the reasonable person you have just spent 5 minutes proving yourself to be. But this only works within a framework. To ensure the final yes lands on their desired target, they must first narrow the field of play. This is where the second, more brutal tool is deployed, the false dilemma. Also known as a black and white fallacy, it is the presentation of a complex situation as if it has only two possible outcomes, one terrible, one acceptable. And of course, the acceptable one aligns perfectly with the manipulator's goal. Either you lend me the money, or I lose everything and it will be on your conscience. If you don't agree to these terms right now, our competitors will seize the opportunity and will be ruined. You can either be with me, or you're against me. Notice the architecture. It ignores all nuance, all alternative paths, all potential for compromise or creative solution. It forces a crisis mindset. It activates the fear of loss, which is a far more powerful motivator than the hope of gain. Faced with what appears to be a choice between a catastrophe and a difficult but necessary action, the difficult action begins to seem not only logical but noble. You are no longer choosing for your own benefit. You are choosing to avert a disaster. Your agency is hijacked by a manufactured emergency. The genius of this combination, the yes set followed by the false dilemma, is that it makes the manipulator's desired outcome feel inevitable. The yes set establishes you as a cooperative partner in a shared reality. The false dilemma then defines that reality as a sinking ship with only one lifeboat. You are not being pushed onto the boat. You are, from your own perspective, making the only rational, conscientious decision available to a reasonable person in a dire situation. The walls of the maze are invisible, but they are there, guiding you unerringly to the single exit they have designed. This is the essence of controlled choice. It is the illusion of freedom within a prison of their construction. Your will is not broken, it is channeled. Your logic is not defeated, it is provided with a corrupted data set. They have not taken your ability to choose. They have simply made all other options appear foolish, dangerous, or morally wrong, leaving their option as the sole survivor of your decision-making process. It is psychological judo, using the weight of your own reason and your own desire to be a good, consistent person to throw you in a predetermined direction. Therefore, the countermeasure is not to refuse all choices, but to immediately question the framework in which the choice is presented. When you feel that momentum of AC agreement building, or when you are suddenly faced with an either-or scenario that fills you with dread, you must actively, forcefully insert a third option, a pause, a question. Those are two possibilities. What others have we not considered? I understand the urgency. Let's take an hour to map out all potential solutions. You must break the binary spell. You must reintroduce spectrum into their black and white world. The moment you challenge the framework of the choice is the moment you reclaim the territory of your own mind. They offer you a crossroads with only one real path. Your power lies in looking beyond the signs, into the wilderness they insist does not exist. We have mapped the territory. We have identified the emotional triggers, the architectural traps, the stage choices. This knowledge is your intelligence report. But intelligence is useless without a field protocol. Awareness alone will not protect you in the moment. When the pressure is applied, when the emotional contagion is thick in the air, when the false dilemma is presented as the only truth, your intellect can be overwhelmed. It can be shouted down by the crafted storm. You need a default action, a drill so ingrained it functions when higher thought is under siege. You need not a strategy but a reflex. That reflex is a deliberate and physical interruption. I call it the critical pause. It is not a thought. It is an action. It is the conscious insertion of space between the stimulus and your response. When you feel the pull, the rising obligation from a love bomber's gift, the chill of a gaslighting contradiction, the manufactured urgency of a false dilemma, you do not engage with the content. You do not argue. You do not justify. You do not even try to analyze. Not yet. First, you stop. You physically alter the rhythm they are imposing. You take a slow, deep breath, focusing on the sensation of the air filling your lungs. You take a deliberate sip of water. You say, "I need a moment to consider that." You look down, you adjust your sleeve, you create a literal temporal gap. This gap is a demilitarized zone in the psychological conflict. It is a firewall. Its purpose is to break the spell of emotional contagion and pattern response. It gives your faster emotional brain time to settle and allows your slower prefrontal cortex, the seat of reason and judgment, to come online and assume command. Within that pause, you perform a single vital diagnostic. You listen for the fizz. The fizz is not an emotion. It is the signal of dissonance. It is the subcutaneous vibration, the quiet static, the inexplicable physical sensation that something is wrong when the words being spoken seem right. It is the tightness in the jaw when someone pays you a flawless compliment. It is the faint nausea when you agree to a demand that logic says is reasonable. It is the inexplicable urge to walk away from a conversation that, on paper, is going in your favor. The fizz is your deepest pattern recognition software, older than reason, wired for survival, detecting a mismatch between what is being presented and the underlying truth. It is your alarm system detecting a foreign emotional signature, a flaw in the performance, a contradiction in the energy. The manipulator relies on you ignoring the fizz. They rely on you overriding that gut sensation with politeness, with logic, with a desire to avoid awkwardness. They count on you rationalizing the unease away. "I'm just being paranoid. They probably didn't mean it that way. It's probably just me." The critical pause is the structured moment where you grant that signal authority. You do not have to understand it. You do not have to decode it. You simply have to acknowledge its presence. The rule is this: if there fizz, there is a fissure. Something is cracked in the presentation. Trust the crack. The pause, then, serves a dual purpose. First, it disrupts their timing and their emotional momentum. It denies them the instant, impulsive reaction they are engineering. Second, it gives you a silent, internal command post from which to observe. From this place of purchased calm, you can now engage your intellect, but you engage it differently. You are no longer trying to determine if their argument is logically sound. You are now a forensic analyst. Your questions change. Instead of "how can I answer this?" you ask, what is the emotional tone being used, and is it proportionate? What is this person's objective in this moment? What would agreeing cost me, not just in resources but in peace? What is the third option they are not presenting? The critical pause turns you from a participant in their constructed reality into an observer of it. It is the psychological equivalent of stepping back from a painting that seems vivid and compelling, and realizing you have been standing inches from the canvas. The pause allows you to see the brushstrokes, the composition, the frame. It allows you to see that it is, in fact, a painting, a representation, not the truth itself. This is your primary defensive protocol. It requires no special knowledge, only the discipline of inaction. When you feel the pressure, you do not push back. You step aside, you create space, you listen to the oldest wisdom in your body, and from that quiet center you decide if, how, and when you will re-engage on your terms, with your eyes open. Your greatest power in that moment is not your wit, but your silence. We have deconstructed the promise. We have examined the mechanisms of emotional hijacking, the architecture of dependency, the theater of false choice. We have established a field protocol, the CR, critical pause, to disrupt the attack in the moment. But a fortress cannot stand on interceptors alone. It requires deep foundations, unassailable walls, an internal well that cannot be poisoned. Reacting to manipulation, no matter how skillfully, is a defensive war of attrition. The ultimate goal is not to become a better battlefield commander on their terrain. The ultimate goal is to become terrain that is inherently hostile to their operations, to move from being a target to being a fortress. This is the work of building psychological immunity. Immunity is not invulnerability. It is resilience. It is the presence of antibodies that recognize and neutralize the pathogen before it can take hold. These antibodies are not secrets. They are often simple, profound, and difficult to cultivate. They are the antithesis of the manipulator's desired landscape. The first and most crucial foundation is a fortified sense of self-worth. This is the primary defense against love bombing and the engineered debt of overpayment. If you know your own value, not as an inflated grandiose statement, but as a quiet, non-negotiable fact, you cannot be bought with counterfeit affection. The manipulator's strategy is to become the source of your validation. They must make you feel that your worth is reflected in their admiration. If your worth is an internal currency, their deposits and withdrawals are meaningless. You appreciate generosity, but you are not indebted by it. You enjoy praise, but you are not defined by its absence. This internal valuation ensures that the rush of love bombing registers not as a life-giving elixir, but as what it is, an unsolicited and therefore suspicious overpayment. You are grateful perhaps, but not obligated. You remain the judge of your own value. The second antibody is the unwavering validation of your own reality. This is the antidote to gaslighting. It begins with a simple daily practice, trusting your own senses and your own interpretations as valid, even if they are later proven incomplete or incorrect. You document your reality. You keep a private journal. You confide in a trusted external source. You say to yourself, I felt hurt by that comment. My feeling is real, regardless of the intent. You do not outsource your truth. When a contradiction arises, you do not immediately assume your perception is flawed. You hold two truths, their version and yours. You investigate the discrepancy from a position of curiosity, not self-doubt. This practice builds an internal compass that cannot be spun by external magnets. You may choose to accommodate another's perspective, but you will never again be convinced that north is wherever they point. The third and most active component is the establishment of non-negotiable boundaries. Not the boundaries you state, but the boundaries you enforce. A boundary without consequence is a suggestion. Manipulators test boundaries like engineers test materials for stress fractures. They will apply pressure to see what you will tolerate. Your immunity is demonstrated not in the declaration but in the calm, consistent action when the line is crossed. This is where the critical pause becomes your planning room. The fizz tells you a boundary is being approached or breached. The pause gives you the moment to choose your enforcement, a changed subject, a concluded conversation, a physical departure. This is not acceptable to me. And then, action. Each enforced boundary is a lesson taught to them and to yourself. It teaches them the cost of manipulation is loss of access. It teaches you that your peace is worth protecting, even at the cost of conflict or disappointment. These three, internal worth, sovereign reality, enforced boundaries, create an ecosystem within you that is toxic to the manipulator's methods. Love bombing finds no purchase on self-worth. Gaslighting fails against a validated reality. Intermittent reinforcement and false dilemmas crumble against someone who will simply walk away from a rigged game. You are no longer a puzzle for them to solve. You become a closed system, a self-sufficient citadel. Therefore, we reframe the entire endeavor. The goal was never to learn to control others. That is the path of the predator, and it is a hollow, paranoid existence, always fearing a more skilled predator. The only control worth having, the only control that is real and lasting, is control over your own choices, your own peace, and the integrity of your own mind. The dark psychology we have outlined is not a toolkit for power. It is a map of vulnerabilities. By studying it, you are not learning to attack those points in others. You are learning to fortify them in yourself. You armor your worth. You sharpen your perception. You define your perimeter. And in doing so, you achieve the only form of instant control that truly exists, the instant and unshakable decision to no longer be a participant in someone else's malicious game. The final defense is a life they cannot influence. Build that life.